Hey guys! I'm going to start off with this video by saying that the Lucid Air is an absolutely amazing vehicle and I'm a huge fan. When I first saw this car unveiled in 2020, I was immediately captivated by the car's super unique styling as well as its headline stats. 517 miles of range and 1,080 horsepower. You see, back in 2020, I was contemplating what I should be buying for my next car, which of course would be an EV. Obviously, I seriously considered a Tesla Model S, which back in 2020 was a no-brainer de facto choice. The Porsche Taycan was the new kid on the block, and I think it's probably the best looking car on sale right now. Not just the best looking EV, I fell deeply in love with the Taycan. I mean, who wasn't when it had those kind of looks and power? When the Taycan was first on sale back in 2020, only the turbo model was available, and unless you're the 1% of the 1%, it's pretty financially irresponsible to buy a car that costs the same as a house. So with the Taycan out of the equation, looks like it's going to be the Model S then. But then all of a sudden, a company that no one has ever heard of called Lucid unveiled its brand new EV called the Air, and it was a pretty big deal since it has caused many EV enthusiasts to take notice of this car. It has stats that would shame a brand new Tesla Model S and was actually even cheaper. Lucid was advertising the Lucid Air to cost less than the $70,000 after the $7,500 federal tax credit at $69,990. I don't know if you guys remember, but before the Model S had its big refresh with the brand new interior, Tesla actually dropped the price of a brand new Tesla Model S to the price of $69,990 from its original price of nearly $80,000. And this was right after the Lucid Air was unveiled at the price of $69,900, which I'm sure has absolutely nothing to do with the Lucid Air whatsoever, right? You guys have to remember that back in 2020, there were no other EV competitors to Tesla. A Tesla Model S was the absolute top dog on the EV market. If you wanted the very best, you wanted a Model S. So for Tesla to immediately respond to Lucid's brand new car with a $10,000 price drop of its Model S, Tesla's flagship model, I think it would be a reasonable assumption that Uncle Elon knew that the Lucid Air was going to be an extremely competent competitor. Actually, Elon definitely would notice since Peter Rawlinson, the father of Lucid Air and CEO of Lucid, previously worked for Elon and was the chief engineer of the Tesla Model S, allegedly. Fast forward to the present, I've owned my Taycan for more than a year and I've had the opportunity to test drive a Lucid Air, as well as having driven a Model S previously. I think now would be a very good time to give my thoughts on why I think the Lucid Air is probably the best car of this trio, when you take every aspect into consideration out of these flagship models. To be honest, you can't really go wrong with any of these vehicles. They're all amazing vehicles in their own ways, and if you purchase any of them, I can absolutely guarantee that you'll be unbelievably happy and satisfied with your purchase. But there are key differences in each of these cars, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. To start off with, as a proud and extremely satisfied Porsche Taycan owner, one key area of Lucid Air's superiority is that it gives you an unbelievably amount of interior and cargo space for the size of the car. The Taycan is really a sports car that happens to have 4 doors with just enough passenger and luggage capacity for a family with 2 small children. But for a car as wide and long as a Taycan, the interior space for its rear passenger is, and it pains me to say this as a Taycan fan and owner, pretty disappointing. You guys have to realize that the Taycan platform is a bespoke EV platform. It's supposed to have the benefit of an EV platform, which has more interior room than ICE vehicles, but it doesn't. Porsche didn't just take the Panamera platform and put an electric motor and battery on it and call it the new Taycan. Yes, I know some of its suspension components are derived from the Panamera, but is that really a criticism? The Panamera itself is a supremely competent car that's loved by critics and owners, which starts from the $100,000 and goes well into the $200,000 price bracket. The Lucid Air's exterior dimension is pretty similar to the Taycan, but the Air gives you so much more room compared to the Taycan that it feels like it's going one size up from a 5 Series to a 7 Series. Actually, it's not that straightforward. The Taycan's front seats are just as spacious and roomy as the Lucid, but the back seats of the Taycan is closer to a 3 Series back seat compared to the Lucid Air that's definitely feeling closer to a 7 Series. But even though the Taycan's back seats don't offer much legroom and headroom, the seating position itself is rather comfortable because it doesn't have the problem that the Lucid Air with its larger battery option and the Tesla Model S has, which is that your knees are too high up because your foot is on a floor that's raised too high. For short journeys, it's actually not that much of a problem, but if you have to sit in a seating position that your thigh isn't being supported by the seats due to your legs being raised higher up from the battery pack underneath, it's really uncomfortable. Now the Lucid Air with a smaller battery option completely remedies this problem because it doesn't have any battery cells underneath the rear passenger leg area, so the seating position is much better than the larger battery option. If it were me, I would definitely purchase the smaller battery option, which still gives you 400 miles of range, which is still class leading, but my rear passengers would sit in much greater comfort. It's the same story when we're comparing the trunk and the frunk. The Lucid's frunk and trunk are much larger than the Taycan's. Compared to the Model S has a hatchback light liftgate that allows you to load things easier due to its larger opening, and the cargo capacity is huge too. The Lucid's trunk, it's not a liftgate, but it does open in a clamshell style, which I believe is the first in the industry. The benefit is that the opening of the trunk is as wide as the car itself. I don't know of any car that has a trunk with that wide of an opening. The front of the Lucid is also the largest of any non-EV truck on the market currently. If you remove the level divider of the Lucid's frunk, it's nearly as large as the actual trunk of a Toyota Corolla. I think there are a fair amount of families in the market for an SUV, not necessarily because they like the look or the tall riding position of an SUV, but they need a family vehicle with more cargo space than a traditional sedan, but they don't want to buy a pickup truck or a minivan. The Lucid Air gives you a compact SUV level of cargo space, but the ride, handling, comfort, and the look of a premium luxury sports sedan. Now, if you're in the market for flagship premium EV sedans and not looking for SUVs, besides preferring the look of a sedan, it likely means that you actually care about driving dynamics, because otherwise you would be looking for a crossover and or SUV like 90% of car shoppers. Peter Rawlinson has been in the car industry for many decades and has worked for companies that are synonymous with great driving vehicles, having worked for Jaguar and Lotus, which I think needs no introduction to how their cars drive. Most trims of the Lucid Air weigh more than 5,000 pounds. To give you some perspective, some models of the Ford F-150 pickup starts only from 4,000 pounds. At more than 5,000 pounds, you would expect the Lucid's handling to perhaps be an area of weakness, but it's actually the opposite. The body motion and suspension control drives and rides like a refined luxury sports sedan. When you turn into a corner, it confidently turns in while the suspension keeps the car flat. It feels firm and sporty, which is what you want as a driver, but somehow the suspension is always compliant with a level of suppleness to it that you feel like you're gliding down the road while the vertical motion is always controlled yet never feeling floaty. Most people agree that the Taycan has one of the best handling and riding suspension setup in the industry, and the Lucid is slightly softer riding than the Taycan, but also feels a bit less sporty. The biggest differentiator between the two is that the Taycan feels like a smaller and more nimble car when you push it. The Lucid, as great as the suspension tuning is, never drove like a sports car to me, especially when you hustle it on twisty roads. It does feel like a fantastic mid-sized sports sedan, which is what it is, but it's not a sports car. The Taycan, on the other hand, drove like an elongated 4-door 911. This isn't a criticism of the Lucid, it's just a testament of why Porsches are so beloved by enthusiasts because they know how to build cars that drive like sports cars. For example, if you compare the Lucid to the Model S, it drives and rides so much better that the Model S doesn't even feel like a luxury product in the same segment. The Model S's suspension tuning is just god-awful. There's zero sophistication in how the car rides and drives. The car managed to feel stiff, bouncy, and uncomfortable with none of the benefits of a stiff suspension. If it weren't positioned as a luxury vehicle, I wouldn't be criticizing it like this, but they do market and price it as a luxury vehicle, and especially when you compare it to the Taycan and the Lucid, it feels much less refined. When you push the Model S on a narrow, twisty mountain road, it drives more similarly to a full-size sedan such as an A8 or 7 Series. It feels like you're driving a boat. There's nothing sporty about the driving experience at all. The Model S feels like the product from a manufacturer that just doesn't have the suspension tuning experience of an OEM that's been building cars for a century, because it is. Having driven and experienced the Lucid now, it really made me feel that if the Lucid was available and on sale before I was scheduled to take delivery of my Taycan, I think I probably would have gone for the Lucid instead because it suited my needs a bit better than my Taycan. It just gave you so much more interior and cargo space while still driving as well it needed to satisfy me. It just gave you so much more interior and cargo space while driving as well it needed to satisfy me. I wanted a car that was going to do everything. Put a smile on my face every time I drove it, be extremely practical, hugely comfortable to ride, and have a gorgeous, unique exterior styling. The Lucid Air checks every single one of those boxes. If this sounds like I'm having buyer's remorse of the Taycan, it's not. The thing is, no matter what car you own, if you use it often, you get used to it. Think about the first day you brought home a new car. You were probably super giddy and excited about it. But 3 years later, when you get into the same car and turn on the engine, do you still get the same excitement? Probably not. Every time I get into my Taycan, even though I've owned it for more than a year, I still get that same excitement, and this is something I've never experienced with other cars that I've owned. The thing with Porsches is that they just have some kind of magic that no matter how long you've owned them, you still get that sense of excitement every time you get into your Porsche. I think this in itself is something that you can't put a dollar sign on. The Lucid is so good that it's nearly making me second guessing my Taycan that I love so much. I don't know what higher praise I can give it. Alright guys, that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Stay tuned for more.